Welcome to the Hud Grad Club. I'm Chris Webb, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Career Consultant with the University of Huddersfield's Careers Employability Service. And, full disclosure, I'm also a University of Huddersfield graduate. So I've generally got pretty positive things to say about both the institution and any of our graduates. But don't take my word for it. In this podcast, we'll be meeting different members of the University of Huddersfield's global alumni community, finding out what makes them tick, about their experiences during their time at the university and their career journeys since completing their studies. Join us as we explore the inspiring, innovative and diverse range of individuals that make up the Hud Grad Club. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hud Grad Club. And Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And just to kind of kick things off, for anyone maybe that doesn't know you already, can you tell us a little bit about your background? So what you studied at the university and kind of what you're doing currently?
Yeah, sure. So, I studied at University of Huddersfield from 2003 to 2007. It was transport design, something that I was very passionate about. I actually kind of found that through my my school time. It was actually I was going to go into product design, but I actually saw an advertisement in the school in our design and technology area, and it was basically saying you can come and design cars. So I was pretty excited by that, and I got onto the course, and I'm actually taking a bit of a different path now, having moved into footwear design and sneakers.
Wow, fantastic. I know we're definitely going to peel that back a little bit. Some people might be thinking, that's quite a transition, but sure, there's a lot of kind of commonality in there. And before we kind of get onto that, before we maybe kind of go into the sort of the career journey in a bit more detail, we start each episode, as always, with our greatest Hud story ever told. So a chance for our kind of alumni to reflect on your time at the university and any kind of key memories that you might have. So I guess the first question within that is, what sort of brought you to the university in the first place? You mentioned a little bit about that there in the kind of introduction. And are there any sort of key memories or special stories you'd like to share from your time at the uni?
I mean, like I mentioned before, it was really about the course itself. So there was very few, and there still kind of is, courses that specialize in car design and transport design. And I just had a great feeling for the university. I felt that it was an open and honest place to be, and I really enjoyed the tutors a lot. And I think I don't have something exactly particular about the time, but I just remember the dedication that the staff had, and how it was always about moving forward and improving. And I just really admired their dedication to the cause. And I think I wouldn't be in the place I am today if it wasn't for that group of great tutors across both the college that we worked in at the beginning for the first year, and then obviously as we moved over to the main campus in the following 3 years.
That's really interesting. And I think you've said there about kind of dedication to the staff and particularly that interest in the course. And that's perhaps a really nice time to come back to your intro. So as you mentioned, that transport design was something that was really appealed to you. You're really kind of passionate about the course. But as you said, from a career perspective, following graduation, you sort of pivoted into footwear design. So tell us a little bit more about that. How did that kind of transition happen, I guess, from kind of finishing the degree to kind of starting off in kind of footwear design, and where's that sort of led you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So basically, I was fortunate enough to get a year placement. So in my third year, I was able to work for TVR, which is a small independent sports car company in the north of England. And there I was, able to actually work with the people that I kind of wanted to be eventually. And it was a fantastic experience. And to this day, it's the key reason why I'm, kind of in the role I am now, because it had a bit of a domino effect for me with my career. But what it was actually understanding the industry on the inside is very different from looking at it from the outside. So I was really able to to see how it worked and the processes behind it. And really the biggest thing for me was the actual amount of work and the time it took to produce like one of these, a car or an interior was so long that, I really wanted to have a little bit more of a hands-on approach and something that took a little bit less time to come to market. And and also I heard stories around, oh, hey, I've designed a door mirror the last 2 years, or I've designed a door handle, and it's I didn't go through all of that work to kind of just work on these kind of like smaller objects. But so I was really fortunate enough to kind of get interest from Puma, who had an office in London, and and took it from there.
And so did you, when you were kind of making that sort of transition to Puma, was it something that you were kind of actively seeking, I guess, in the sense of, had you considered footwear design as a possible place to transition to, from kind of transport design, or was it that the interest from them, I guess, that kind of hooked you in and then led you on that path?
Yeah, exactly. I think what my strategy was, I wrote down a list of all of the companies that I had like a real interest in. And I think it's an important thing to do, because you'll start to realize, like, it's the things that you buy into, it's the products that you most admire. And I think when you admire the brand that you work for, you really admire, the work that you do, and you actually the effort that you put into it. And I think for me, I kind of made a list of all these different brands, and it went across many different like areas of sport and consumer electronics and things like that. And Puma were one of them, and they were pretty much the first one to kind of get in touch. And like I mentioned before, my third year in the industry was the reason that I kind of got that internship with them, and then subsequently the full-time position.
And is there sort of crossover there, from a kind of, I guess, a general sort of skills or kind of knowledge perspective? Because, you mentioned originally being really interested in sort of product design. So are a lot of the principles kind of quite transferable in the sense of, the work that you've done around transport design, bringing that then to kind of footwear design context? Was that transition relatively smooth for you, or were you able to kind of pick up, I guess, what you needed to know within the brand and within that industry once you were working in it?
There was a very nice transition across, because I actually worked quite a lot more on the interior side when I was doing my placement year, and that was a combination of hard and soft form, whether it be like the seating, the leather and the textile materials, versus the harder objects like the dials and the kind of indicator stalks and things like that. And a shoe is pretty much that. You have a harder product design in the midsole and the outsole, and then the upper is very soft because it has to fit to a more organic shape, being the foot. So the crossover was actually very close. And I think the only thing that was required extra knowledge and learning was about how to build the product itself, how to build shoes, how to build sneakers. And there's some level of complexity to things like the last, which is the form of the foot, and how that creates the volume and the shape. And then obviously as you move towards more performance-based product, and how kind of biomechanics start to play a part in that. And that's something I learned as I kind of continued my career.
And as you say, you've sort of continued that career within footwear design sort of since that kind of initial internship with Puma, that you originally mentioned. And I think that's, from what you've said, has led you kind of not just into the market in London, but also to a number of other countries as well. So tell us a little bit about that. You decided to kind of stay in footwear design. What's that sort of led to, I guess, within your career? What type of roles? Has it all been relatively similar sort of products or similar companies, or have you had quite a few different experiences within the industry?
Yeah, and it's been quite wide, actually. I mean, I would say that I've now pretty much touched every form of sneaker or footwear now. So I've done everything from like high level performance product in football, to lifestyle product, to luxury fashion product. So it's taken some time. I'm 38 now, and it's nice to have like rounded out the portfolio and been able to work on everything. And it's not something that is that common. There are designers that specialize in just performance product. There are designers that specialize in just lifestyle product. But I've kind of been able to explore other brands, and I would say that that's really down to the fact that I grew up in a very rural environment in the Midlands, and my goal was to explore and get as far away as I could, not in the sense of getting away from my parents, just more from the fields and the cows, and more to places that inspired me. And that's kind of like my first obviously journey was Huddersfield on my own, and then going down to London for Puma was kind of amazing. It's a fantastic city. It's very inspiring. And then obviously the product that I worked on there was more on the fashion side, so that was really exciting. And then having left Puma, I got a new role in Paris. So I spent nearly 2 years in Paris working for Le Coq Sportif, which was a smaller sports brand on the lifestyle side. And then finally getting kind of my break at Adidas. And I think the interesting thing there was, and I think we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, is one of the key things in the industry was actually being able to deal with rejection. I applied for Adidas over four or five times before actually getting the role that I kind of dreamed about. And that was quite difficult at the beginning to get through, but it was such a rewarding time when I got that call to kind of visit the campus, and you kind of turn up to this place that has all this history. And and it was a fantastic time where I split kind of my 6 years between Originals men's, which was the lifestyle side, and then actually getting into the performance side with global football, which is something I really wanted to do as well, to try and learn the performance aspect. And then and then it's just kind of you kind of hit these ceilings and you want to explore, and I'm always interested to see what's around the corner. I think it's just something that kind of bugs me if I can't keep moving. And and I had an amazing opportunity to go and build performance basketball at Converse and be part of the Nike family. So I moved over to the Netherlands first for a year, and then from there I went to Boston for 3 years, and basically kind of started from scratch again, and worked with some pretty amazingly talented people at Nike, and built some great product. And then we all went through a little bit of a rough patch in the 2020 and 21, and there's sometimes your career has to take a little bit of a back seat, and you look out for what really means the most, and that's family. And we made the decision to move back to Europe, and obviously, but that also opened up a super exciting door for me to kind of like start my own little agency, and then kind of work for multiple brands at the same time. So
wow, fantastic. And as you said, you really have explored, that initial goal of kind of, casting out away from the rural kind of confines. Yeah, you definitely kind of achieved. And I mean, you mentioned that, lots of kind of, I guess, different points throughout your career where certain circumstances or, the values that you held or the work that you were working on kind of then potentially led you in different directions within the industry. What would you say, I guess, have been maybe some of those light bulb moments throughout your career where it's kind of really sort of sparked off, okay, I knew this was the direction of travel that I might want to go in, even if you weren't sure what that end destination was?
I mean, I was always so dedicated to getting into the field of design. I mean, it was, through my grandfather, who was a fantastic, engineer and creative, and he could kind of like put his hand to anything. And so it started very, very early on, when I was like maybe 10, 11. And And then just, yeah, I feel fortunate enough that I was able to understand what I wanted to do from such an early age. And I know that it's not an easy thing for, for younger, whether it's kids or adults, like moving into a career path to actually understand what they really want to do. And, I do admire people who take that step to kind of deviate from what they originally intended to do. But I just kind of I had this drive, and I think like having succeeded with my degree, and then I think getting that first internship, I kind of always go back to that. And that was a moment where it could have been a very different path for me. It was after the second year of at university, and everybody was very tired after the semester. And we had some really great projects with the Nissan and Rover at the time. And and I think that kind of thing as well, like the fact that the university collaborated so well with external partners to kind of give us that that insight into the industry, that kind of kept me motivated to say, okay, like I'm going to stay for an extra couple of months. I'm not going to go on vacation. I'm not going to kind of put the tools down yet. I'm going to actually work towards the goal of getting that internship. And and having got that, it's the thing that was like most interested to a lot of those hiring managers, to kind of combine that skill set of the car industry. And even to this day, I have a client I just signed a couple of weeks ago who, he was literally saying that he wanted to hire somebody who's a sneaker designer that has done cars. So it was pretty much like a match. So yeah.
That's great. And I think it's a really useful kind of reflection, in terms of that potential crossover when it comes to sort of, the product or the, the type of space that you're working in. Because I think sometimes we have those conversations, particularly maybe with students who've started degree at 18, and, it's an area of interest, as you were saying, but maybe it's not something you've explored in terms of what does the full picture of the industry look like, or are there adjacent industries? And I think what you've kind of mentioned there, that sort of reflection on actually, the importance of where could there be crossover with product? Where could your kind of experience or your skills or knowledge actually maybe be leveraged in another industry, related industry or unrelated industry? I think, is always really useful to consider. Because as you said, particularly kind of when we're younger, we don't necessarily know we're going to want to deviate. We may want to deviate, and actually kind of knowing where maybe there are other avenues for you is kind of really important. And I think, great kind of point there around the influence of people as well. In your career. So you mentioned about your grandfather there. Have there sort of been other, I guess, influential kind of characters or people you've worked with within your career to date that have also kind of, I guess, sort of helped you along the way within your career journey?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with the team at Huddersfield as well. Like, I mean, I don't think Dave Swan is with the team anymore, but he was a great part of that Huddersfield design team. And Hugh Corcoran, who he was a big influence in the work that we did in the semesters on campus. And then as I moved then into that transition into the the internship, I had a few guys there that were fantastic, like friends still to this day, and like they've been to my wedding and stuff. And it's like those relationships like have really helped me understand that without those guys that I wouldn't be where I am today. And I think it goes back a little bit to some of the things that I try and stick to. So like I have these like personality traits that I try and really hold dear, and it's honesty, intrigue, and creativity. And these are all two are part of my career. One is a natural personality, a personal trait of mine. And I've realized that over the time, your network is probably one of the most important things you can have, and your actual reputation in the industry as well, that is very, very small. So I go back to my Puma days as well. My hiring manager was an Italian 21 years in the industry, and he didn't have to show me the ins and outs of making shoes, but he did. And from that, from that humble beginning, I was able to kind of get a kickstart, a jump in that industry, where it would have taken me probably a lot longer to do it myself. And I think there's always been at least one or two people on each one of those those opportunities that I've had in other brands. And when I kind of go back to the me going over to Converse and Nike, that was because of a former boss of mine in Originals, who set that up, and it's just a nice thing to have, because he wouldn't have done that if he didn't feel that I was capable of doing that role. So there's been a lot of people, probably too many to even name, but
well, I think you gave it a good go, which is
Yeah.
the important thing. I mean, amazing kind of how often the power of people sort of comes up as a theme in these podcasts. I think it's very much a truism, as you've said, in terms of that impact that people can have in different ways as well, as you said, not just necessarily from kind of providing sort of professional launch pads, but also people that you want to stay connected with for the rest of your life, personal life and professional life. So I mean, that's great to hear. And you touched on this sort of a little bit earlier, but this seems like a really good time to kind of come to the final part of our podcast, which is the underrated careers advice section. So again, kind of plugging into any of that sort of wisdom, nuggets of kind of information that you've sort of absorbed, I guess, during your career so far that you feel have been particularly useful, or anything from your own experience that I guess you feel current students or early career graduates in particular, might find very helpful when they're starting out in their careers. So do you have any underrated careers advice you'd like to share as part of the podcast?
I think it's like, just stay true to who you are. Don't try and be somebody you're not. I think it's super important to kind of hold those kind of like I talked earlier, personality traits close to you. And I think it will come through. And the industry is tough. There's people that are going to be there to play a different game, and you have to kind of learn to try and navigate that. But it's really important to have like a few of those things that are close to you. And I actually listened to a fantastic podcast by Toto Wolff on the High Performance podcast, and his kind of values are all related to respect, obsession, integrity, and loyalty. And I think these are all extremely important, and they're all things that like are related to people and just treating people really well, and that will always come back around. And so I think like the people part is extremely, especially for me now, where I'm now working in an environment where I need a network to kind of continue to get work. And I would say that I haven't had to do any form of advertising so far in the year and a half that I've been kind of doing it, and it's all been word of mouth. It's all been kind of connected to that. And then I touched on it a little bit earlier around this idea of rejection, and I think it's going to be there all the time. And I think the quicker you can get through it, or be exposed to it, the better you start to deal with it. And I think I've experienced it in a way where it's the ability to kind of stick to it, and understand that you are good enough to do it. And you have to keep evolving as well, asking questions, understanding why the process didn't go the way it went. How can I do it better the next time? And I think there's a reason why after 4 times I was able to get the role at Adidas. And and I think don't be afraid to connect with people in the industry. I mean, sometimes they don't always reply straight away, but I had a few experiences where I connected with people on LinkedIn, and they again gave me great advice. I think it's I would say network, character traits, and just kind of getting through the ability to deal with levels of rejection.
Oh, fantastic. Well, no, brilliant reflections, Richard. I think particularly kind of coming back to what you've said there around character traits, is maybe something we don't talk about necessarily as much. I think, the word authentic often gets kind of thrown around quite a lot, doesn't it? Particularly when we talk about things like LinkedIn and maybe that idea of personal branding. But I think the example you've given there about, people being able to spread the word about, your reputation based on word of mouth, based on knowing you as an individual, based on knowing what you deliver, as kind of a professional. I think that's maybe not always talked about quite as much. And as you said, sort of connects a little bit more, I guess, to how you are as a person, those kind of core traits that people, I guess, kind of witness every time they meet you or they work with you and all those sort of things. So I think it's a really important takeaway, and one maybe that we don't, in the social media age, we don't always talk about in quite as much depth. So thank you so much for sharing kind of those insights into your career journey. Really, really helpful to kind of hear some of those directly, particularly, as you said, with kind of such a varied career. If we've got any students or graduates who might be kind of watching the podcast, listening to the podcast, who might want to potentially find out a bit more about your work or get in touch, where's the best place for them to find you?
Please reach out if you have any questions. It's either my website, richardward.design. Then I also have a LinkedIn page as well, and you can find me at Richard James Ward, and then also on Instagram as Richard Ward Design as well.
Fantastic. Well, what we'll do is we'll make sure that we kind of put those along the bottom of the screen for people that are watching the podcast, and we'll include those links in the podcast notes if people are listening instead. So brilliant, great offer there. If you want to find out more about Richard's work or get in touch, please do take a look at those links. And that brings us really nicely to the end of the podcast. So Richard, thanks so much for taking the time to join us, becoming the latest member of the Hud Grad Club. And obviously we wish you well with all of your future endeavours.
Pleasure, Chris. Thanks so much for your time.
Fantastic. Take care. All the best. Enjoyed the podcast? Then go to the University of Huddersfield YouTube channel for all of our future episodes. Subscribe, like, and don't forget to hit the bell button for notifications. If you'd like to be involved in the Hud Grad Club podcast moving forward, please get in touch with us on alumni@hud.ac.uk.